There we go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. And by God, thank you for being with us on this, somber and special day. I have to say, and we've had this experience, before. We've been on the air, I think, once before on 9/11 years ago. This remembrance has been going on so long that we have cycled through it landing on a Saturday multiple times. That's kind of indicative of how far removed and yet still how fresh a lot of this stuff is. And I got to be like completely honest. It is hard for me when this kind of thing comes up to sort of arrange in my head how to do the show, how to address this, because on the one hand, a true remembrance has value, and it is good to remember not only the victims of that day, and if you've watched any of the reading of the victims' names this morning, I literally turned it on for all of 30 seconds before I started tearing up, because they have the victims' family members reading in alphabetical order, reading a section of the names, ending usually on their relative before moving on to the next family. And they have, the switchover is so fast. I feel like they have multiple podiums. I haven't seen a wide shot of I didn't get a chance to see a wide shot of what they're doing, but it seems like they just pick up right away, because it would take forever in a lot of ways. And then what struck me while they were reading this, and just one of the, and I'm gonna trigger myself, but one of the, when I first turned it on, it was a girl and her sister reading ultimately what led up to their father's name. And she's pregnant with what would have been his grandchild. And you could see them holding it together, but barely. And and it's just there. There's a bittersweet to it because they've got this new life coming into their world while saying goodbye to their dad. And then the one detail that strikes me, I think, most about 9/11, besides the obvious involvement of the Saudi royal family, we'll get to that because some of the information that Trump, I guess technically they didn't intend to do this, but they released some of the information through lazy redaction that brings it even closer to tying it to the House of Saud and all that. The Biden administration, specifically Joe Biden, wants to declassify even more stuff coming from there. That in doing that, that's one of the details that is going to start, after 20 years, really coming out. And after the death of Jamal Khashoggi, no one's surprised, but also I think there's a renewed interest in recognizing the sort of humanitarian failings, let's just say, of that particular government in the world, which will be, I think, a large part of the next 20 years of remembrance as the Saudis, quite frankly, run out of money and oil becomes less important to the world, and we have to, we as a government, and as a country don't have to play as much footsie in the world to keep our lights on. And that's been a part of our domestic and foreign policy for the last 50 years, specifically because of that. This awareness that they could at any time choke off our ability to function has made us look past a lot of the more horrifying things in the world. In the same way, I would argue that we have looked past many of the atrocities in China because we needed the production. And as COVID has moved production to parallel countries in the region, like Vietnam, Cambodia, Taiwan again, and South Korea, and out of China, and as China continues to shun, the West, this giant picture, any democracy essentially, that in their shunning of that, we're becoming more emboldened, I think, to speak openly as a country about their shortcomings in a way that they just did not have sort of a stranglehold on us to some degree. And we had to trade off. Do we, millions out of work, or speak honestly about these people? And that has been a balancing act in the State Department and in our governing principles for decades because of that. And it's not just business interests versus reality. It is American jobs, American taxpayers' worth, and healthcare, and all these other things that are tied up in our economy, tied up in our ability. Ambulances still run on gas. This is a reality that the American system recognizes. And as we get further from that, it will be interesting to see this. But one of the other things, I think the primary detail that I think, I don't know how to put it, like affects me every year when this comes around, is that there are somewhere in the order of 1,100 9/11 dead that are still, their remains are still unaccounted for because they I think the New York Times has it listed at 1106 currently, because they have continued, because of DNA technology getting better over the last 20 years, to be able to tell. And you were talking about human beings who were effectively pulverized in their death, just beyond measure. And in rubble that was, much of it was, there was just nowhere to put it all. So they just scooped a lot of it up to get as much of it out of there, because it was also, we talk about and we will discuss that today, the sort of toxic air around New York. We'll understand that the concrete and asbestos and all the stuff that was in the buildings that fell was in and of itself, puffing toxins into the air by sitting there in the wind, the longer you let it stay. So there was this movement to go, as bad as the air drifting through the city was just from the actual fall, that stuff sitting there with rain and wind and weather affecting it, it could have a very drastic effect on the health of all New Yorkers. And with the removal of it as fast as they possibly could, and the recognition of that danger, so with it went the remains, all but minuscule amounts of well over 1,200 of the people killed that were not identified directly. And for those families, watching and waiting, there's just a level of heartbreak as they know that their family member worked there. They know that their family member was there. But they have no remains to bury because they were on the 23rd floor of a gigantic office building that collapsed centrally into there. Johnny, we can hear you, right? Can you say hi? Make sure that, yeah, okay. So they should be able to hear you out in the interwebs. We're streaming, of course, at infotainmentwars.com and, of course, at fwank.com, FWANQ, on Twitch, twitch.tv/HalSparks, where, if you are the college kid that's still living in your house, yes, can subscribe. Yes, nice. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's sweet. We will, talk. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to take calls, but not until after. We have My Hero Power coming on at the mid-mark. And I think it's kind of, they support the station, they support the show in Chicago. But also, what led us into this situation was our reliance on fossil fuels. I see. Oh, I know what it is. Gotcha. Yeah. So the idea, within, I beg your pardon. I fixed it, guys. You should be able to hear Johnny now. Thank you.
It's always been about oil.
Yeah. So the reality that we deal with in looking back on this is that this is what this was the sort of the price that came due in our reliance on fossil fuel and our its singular stranglehold on our economy, on our way of life, and not just us. There's a lot of American focused energy on this stuff, but the entire world jumped on the petroleum bandwagon very early on without any knowledge of the danger that would come. It took us a while even to get lead out of gasoline. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. And like I said, I want to discuss a little bit about where we go from here and what the lesson of this time is in terms of the ultimate lesson in many ways of 9/11 is that renewables and getting as far away from a resource-based economy as possible will be the defining change in international relations and
Without
this
question.
kind of thing happening. And I think philosophically that's the thing we also need to never forget. We'll be back right after this. But it's funny, like everybody talks about like how gas prices are going up right now, and I'm like, you do realize they're kept artificially low, right?
Yeah.
In every way. If we had to pay for every gas station for, and actually pay instead of the government picking up the tab and we didn't see it, because our taxes went there to cover that cost, to make sure that there was an infrastructure across the country, much in the same way that we're trying to do with electric cars right now, we would have never done it. We'd have gone, I'll stick to my horse till you guys figure it out.
It's the same with sausage.
Oh, do you don't want to see how it's made?
Oh. You just rescued that completely fake analogy.
I tried. So welcome to everybody in the chat room, and thanks, and sorry about the audio. Apparently, it got stuck on a monitor only thing on my. Every time I start up. Is that Chicago? Make a noise, or is that you?
Hey, this is Ty.
I just clicked to see how Vickery's
hey, Ty.
super chat.
Sorry, Ty. Hey, there you are. Are you going to join us in this section? This coming up?
I don't know what time I'm supposed to join, so I just received the link and clicked on it.
Okay.
You tell me when the good time is.
At the 30-minute mark, because then we can talk. I'm sort of like setting you up in this next segment too, because I do want to talk about the value of renewables and genuinely fold it into the conversation, and and set that up. So call me. I'll mute you during that time. You can stay connected if you want, but I'll bring you in at the 30-minute mark.
Sounds good. All right, talk to you soon.
Cool.
Ty or Hal, could you guys turn down like Ty by like a few decibels
Yes,
once he gets going?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're at 0, so I'll boost us a little bit. And
Attention.
it's great for a somber day like today.
Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We'll be right back.
I always jump the gun, and like they're so long, I always think they're done, and then they're not. Hi, everybody in the chat room, and thank you for joining us at infotainmentwars.com and, of course, at fwank.com, on YouTube, on Twitch, if you're on Twitter. If you follow me at Hal Sparks, you can watch it there as well. If you want, you can watch on Facebook at the Hal Sparks page. There's a little at the Hal Sparks page. That's how they do it now. Like I guess Facebook has fallen into that. The one thing I want to make, like, really the point of discussing it today is because we'll talk about, there's no way to get around in the discussion of today and people replaying the video and all that. And we all remember where we were, and we'll talk in the next hour about our own personal memories of that day a little bit, and, perhaps intermingled with some of the folks, And to me, though, while it's interesting, and while it does provide a personal connection to that day in many ways, the same way, people of the generation before talk about the Kennedy assassination or things like that. The reality is, in never forgetting how this happened, and what happened, I guess, is to really remember what led up to it. That it was, and this is not in any way to forgive the actions of the people involved. In my estimation, it was an act of absolute evil. There is no excuse for killing innocent people to get your point across, ever, not ever. I'm against the death penalty, not because some people don't deserve it in theory, but because there's a chance that an innocent person might be killed. And that is reason enough to just lock someone up and proverbially throw away the key, right? That's it. And so
it doesn't prevent anything.
No, it does not. And the worst of the worst who deserve it most of the time are the people who could care less and have no concept of life and death.
They just didn't think they'd be caught.
That's right. And the same thing applies, I would argue, to the hijackers and the people that supported them and the people that, caused those deaths on that day, or any act of terrorism that leads to a death. You always think, well, it's, I'm doing this to show off my fealty to whatever cause, whatever leader, whatever psychopathy that I actually have. So, but the one thing I do want to really make the point about in our never forgetting 9/11 is never forgetting that this is, in fact, related to blowback from our involvement in these countries being so deeply involved in the oil trade. If indeed all these attackers had come from Afghanistan or had come from Iraq at all and not been financially supported by the Saudis and had been related to a bunch of intermingled back and forth between us and the Cold War between Russia and all this, none of this would matter. The Russians wanting a pipeline through Afghanistan, the Europeans' need for the Nord Stream pipeline right now from Russia, the financial help that it gives to Russia and carrying out what it does, the petrochemical industry both our use of fossil fuels to burn for, to keep the engine of society running, mixed with, of course, our need for plastics, because let's not forget how much plastic is in our world and how much of it comes from the petroleum industry. It is in many ways about to, if it has not already, overtake our need for actually burning of oil specifically, is our need for making plastics out of it. So the memory that we should have, along with those of the people who passed and the damage and the heartbreak that went with that family, to remind ourselves to never forget that, is not necessarily to go, shake our fist at the hijackers that died, or shake our fist at the people who supported them, fed them, housed them, taught them how to fly but not how to land, paid for those flight lessons, all the other stuff that goes with, that led up to 9/11 in a material sense, but also our part in, as we became aware, because I'm a lot more forgiving about the early addiction to oil that America and other countries had, because quite frankly, it was simply, if you look at There Will Be Blood, from, the movie, or, if that's most people's, I think, closest idea to the sort of the oil rush, or people's view about the Beverly Hillbillies was our view of oil for a very long time. I mean, think about that this was just, oh my God, discovering oil on your land, that's fantastic. And it would lead to this. This is not a, throwing guilt or aspersion about a burgeoning economy that came out of something that fueled something in a way, literally, that most of us couldn't grasp. That you would have to, there will be energy breakthroughs in our lifetime that perhaps will equal oil, but they will come over a slow rolling period of time. If we have, thorium micronuclear reactors everywhere that don't produce weaponizable waste and have a shorter half-life for the waste they do produce, and you can bury it in the earth and it's not a concern, that will happen, but it will happen over decades and solar panels become increasingly efficient to the point where you'll just paint them onto your car, and the car's sitting in the sun during the day. The damage that will be done to that is parking garages, because nobody wants to park on the roof right now. Then everybody will want to park on the roof. The best parking space in a parking garage right now is on the first floor. It will be the top floor at some point because of that, right? That every house will be built with paint on solar panels, or, and a white roof. I cannot tell you, folks, whatever you can do to lighten the color of your roof helps. It's nearly as good as planting 5 trees. Because it reflects light the way snow and ice does. I don't know why anyone in Phoenix or Las Vegas or Tucson or anywhere in Texas doesn't have a white roof. It boggles my mind. So, that said, nothing was a force accelerator on an economy that, by the way, led us to less than 1 billion people alive on the whole planet to nearly 7 billion people alive on the whole planet, because now you could feed them. You can get food to places where there is no food, with vehicles that are on tires that roll out into the middle of someplace because they're powered by a gas engine, in a way that laying train tracks would never have been practicable. That building a runway and flying stuff in short distance to a bunch of places, or having enough helicopters in the air to short run food and the like. Trucking and cars have not only saved billions of lives, but created billions of lives. And so our addiction to oil, which gets written off as this kind of like our grandparents and our parents should have known that this was going to be poisonous later. I got news for you, kids. Everything was poisonous when they were alive. Everything. The Industrial Revolution, living anywhere for very long, living downstream from someplace and not understanding, the geothermal shifts. Everything was
Have you ever seen
toxic.
pictures of the old major league teams? All those guys are like 22 years old and they look like they're 45.
Exactly. Look at I used to have that joke about the Dust Bowl, and you'd have this 15-year-old, this like 17-year-old dude and his 15-year-old wife and their two 13-year-old kids, and everybody looks 90. If you think they should have known what this was going to lead to, go look at the Dust Bowl, because that was an instant view of what people understood about the land. They killed the topsoil, the wind came and blew it all away, and it was poverty writ large. People were going to farm their own land. They were going to make their own food. It was a hippie paradise in a lot of ways. It was the early hippie paradise, and it failed miserably because people didn't understand. They didn't have a deep understanding that most farmers who'd worked for generations on stuff did. We got to take a break. When we come back, Ty from My Hero Power is going to be on with us, and we'll discuss a little bit about, it's a nice lead in about how we can you have the opportunity right now to shift. I'm trying to make this as little a sales pitch as I can, because it's not. It really isn't.
Right.
This is something you can do right now to tip that direction if indeed it's not available in your area. We'll talk to him after we come back, and then we'll, because that to me is the theme of today. How do we get away from fossil fuels in as fast as possible, reclaim the environment, make life safer and healthier for everybody? We'll be back right after this. Does anyone think loser will hump a flag at the boxing match today? I think he's just in a little booth. I don't even know that he says he's going to be there at this boxing match, the Trump thing tonight.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't necessarily I don't think he's going to be ringside.
Why would he go? Yeah, why would he go to a place?
Yeah. I mean, you know how weird he gets if he can't pronounce something? This was Junior's idea to make money off this. And he's doing it because his son's convinced him there's a lot of money, and he said yes. And it's stupid, just like all of Don Jr.'s other suggestions.
Yeah, it is not a good idea. This is not a prize fight.
No. And Ty, are you there?
I am. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ty.
Chicago, how does Ty sound?
Could I get just him to talk a little bit, please?
Hey, yeah. How does this sound?
Sounds pretty good. He could go down maybe one decibel, but it's a lot more balanced than it was before.
Gotcha. Okay. And I will.
Hey.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Al, I just want to mention, it does seem a little odd to be talking about my company today,
Yeah.
just given, September 11th. So if you want to stay away from Hero Power stuff, that's fine. I can talk a lot about climate because I'm of the climate podcast that I do.
Yeah.
And talk about, fossil fuels and renewable energy and that kind of stuff without really promoting the company, because it feels kind of weird. So,
I understand that. I think it is a good thing, and I think it should be mentioned. But I would rather talk more about the philosophy of this and how it lines up with today, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Because I don't have any problem with us. Part of the problem with the environmental movement in a lot of ways is that they have yet to find a way to incentivize people to feel safe enough to go, okay, well, we've still got a range anxiety problem with electric cars, and almost all of them go 300 miles on a charge now. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
That's where people's heads are. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I can definitely talk about all of that for sure.
Great. Okay. I know I'm only on one day a week. I get it. I'm gonna have to jump on GarageBand and start sawing something together. This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive and all that. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
Hey, Hal, did you mean something like this?
This is the House Bar Show. Wow. And a guitar note, and then progressive and all that. Yeah, it's gonna be good.
The Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Welcome back. Joining us right now is Ty from MyHeroPower.com. I wanted to talk to Ty today specifically I mean, we've had Ty on to talk about the company before, and if you don't know, what My Hero Power does is they allow you to put your monthly payment that you pay for electricity in your home and all that towards renewables without having to change anything materially in your domicile, which is the big thing that a lot of people can't grasp, right? They like, because I just got solar panels on my home. So we went through that process.
Yay.
And they are flipping the switch on it next week. So there's a permitting process, and they come out and they have a guy climb on your roof and stomp around for a while and drill holes. And
that's my favorite part.
Yeah. And then they put the panels in, then they squirt some caulk around it. So when it rains, you're like, oh, thanks for sunshine. And all that stuff. That's a lot. And it's a lot for some people. And it's a lot for, to think about the investment. I live in an area, especially where water and power are scarce sometimes, and air conditioning is a big part of life. So occasionally they'll tell you to turn your power down. No, don't use as much. So if I can take weight off that system, I feel like I have a responsibility to do so. It's not even so much about locking in my power costs, but also it gives me the ability to know that I'm not drawing from the grid the way everybody else is. Ty, are you with us? Are you there?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Congratulations on your solar purchase.
Thanks. It's a big deal, and I'm very proud. Years later, after I had my house in Venice for a long time, and that was always the intention. But it was like just starting to have incentives and the ability to do that. Now it's pretty well. That wheel is pretty greased right now. Before we get into, because you have an environmental podcast that you talk about, not only just our effect on the environment that we have by the petroleum that we use, the fossil fuels we use, and coal obviously is, probably the biggest polluter in there, mixed with, of course, methane, the idea that it's all cow wind. And we all know, I guess, morally and emotionally that Johnny Million is probably as responsible individually as a herd for that situation.
And you're not going to hit me with a sound effect after all that?
I actually was waiting for the moment. There you go. But tell us, first of all, tell us about the podcast so people can also listen to that as well and kind of get us up to speed on that. And then I have some questions about, that shift and the idea for the company and how you guys actually turned a good idea into something helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So I host the Climate Pod every week. So every week we have discussions with the leading experts on the science, but also the economics, the politics, the social justice issues, the cultural issues around the climate crisis, and all that the climate crisis impacts, and all that has contributed to the climate crisis. So we have world leading experts. We have world leaders. We had just recently had the Prime Minister of Australia on the podcast. But so much of where we are today is a result of decisions that were made a long time ago, and I'm talking about decades ago. And we've got to understand why those decisions are made and why we are in the place where we are today. And that's really what our podcast is about, because the science is the science. It's straightforward. For the most part, people understand now that as we continue to emit carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, we are warming the planet.
Right.
But understanding why that has happened and why it's been uncontrolled for so long, and why these fossil fuel companies have been able to get away with misleading, with lying, and basically delaying climate action for decades. That is the real part of the story that we try to tell on the Climate Pod every week.
Yeah, well, those companies can't do that unless there is a reciprocal benefit felt by other people, even if it's, all the way down to the voter, where, we knew pollution was terrible and that you don't want it in your lungs a long time ago. I mean, LA, where I live, when I moved to Los Angeles, when I was, I graduated high school and drove straight to LA, when I got there, The sky was yellow and brown half the time. It was ugly. You could see the pollution. And in many ways, the efforts to clean up that pollution you could see was, tipped against, we'll hide the fact you've kind of forgotten about it a little bit. Once you can't see it anymore, no harm, no foul. And we as the users, the end users of the product, I think have known for a very long time. Probably, I wouldn't go back as early as some people, but late 70s, the 90s, really, like I said, when you could see the sky in a lot of places. We've been aware of the damage it can do to our lives and the environment locally. And over time, we have grown to understand the broader impacts of it because it's never been more interconnected. As people and business people travel and as the economy gets more intertwined, we weren't as aware of the pollution ring around Beijing, for example, which is a miracle of modern idiocy. If anybody knows about this, Beijing's built like a bullseye. And so they decided to build what they call the industrial ring around the city to ring the city with factories so everybody could just drive straight out from their apartment building to it, no matter where they were. And it basically surrounded the city with choking smoke that no matter which way the wind blowed, there was enough to blanket the city. I think people had forgotten that there were cities like that all over the world because we had cleaned up our skies a little bit. And now we realize we're all tied together in this. So how do you, and having spoken to the person from, Australia, for example, who was it? Their environmental,
No, the Prime Minister.
Oh, the Prime Minister.
Turnbull.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So not necessarily the most environmentally friendly guy ultimately, although they've got a lot of, it's big sky country down there. And so, sometimes hotter climates mean bigger spiders. And that's the important thing. We've got over 100,000. The crocs have all come back because we're going back to an environment we haven't seen since the dinosaurs lived. Those greenhouse gases, I'm sure the crocodiles don't mind to some degree. They really don't. But, their linkage with us, you're talking to, this is something that during the rise of this was an impossibility, the rise of the petroleum industry. And now there's an awareness that they're not necessarily the good guys and they may have been selling us a bill of goods and we may have been looking the other way ourselves because we didn't see another option at the time.
Right. And as consumers, we don't have another option. I mean,
right.
And I think that's the critical thing to understand here. You're talking about air pollution and something that this number is really hard to wrap your head around, but 7 million people die every single year from air pollution around the world. 7 million. And that number in 2021 seems incomprehensible. And so much of that, so much of the, like you were talking about around Beijing, same thing here in the United States.
Yep.
Those coal plants, those natural gas plants are built in poorer communities, right? Where people they do not choose to live near these coal and gas plants. They're built there on purpose because companies know that people living in those communities don't have the political power a lot of the times to stop that. Well, so 7 million people are dying every year unnecessarily. And with, you talk about LA as an example. LA is a fantastic example. Mm-hmm. We know that air pollution regulation works because you can see the sky in LA now, right? Yeah, it works.
Yes.
And so that's the frustrating thing is we know the problem. We know the solutions. We have the solutions available to us today. But we just don't have the political will to get it done. And that is what is so incredibly frustrating when you look at the state of the world today.
I will say, and since we're coming up on the break, I'd like you to stay through the break with us if you have time, because this is an important part of this conversation on 9/11, for me anyways, to discuss, what got us to the point where we were so engaged in the Middle East in a violent way that led us to a circumstance where this kind of thing could happen. That believe me, I don't know if you even know this. I might be springing this on you, Ty. Do you realize that the first person to be killed by a car, run over by a car in the United States, was killed by, do you know it? An electric car.
No. Oh, yes.
Henry
we're definitely, yeah.
Yes, Henry Bliss was killed in San Francisco stepping off of a trolley car, which was also electric, lined up with an electrical system that they have throughout the city. And he stepped off that thing and he was hit by a speeding electric vehicle going all of 9 miles an hour. Took him 3 days to die. Things happened way slower back then. And there were articles about how these monstrosities moved far too fast to be allowed in cities. But they were electric. The initial, taxis, the vast majority of them were electric because they didn't pollute. They were quieter. And as we move towards better battery technology, our awareness of, moving from lithium ion to solid state batteries and the like, I've talked about that a lot on my live stream. There is an opportunity now for what I would call a force accelerator in this, an industrial leap forward. Like interestingly enough, that I think the technology was held back so long, where the petroleum companies stiff-armed, electric vehicles and the like to keep their profits up, that they pushed it back so long that literally the technology has been able to grow in the background with battery life and all kinds of other things, that it's going to snap forward in a way that it will take, over the span of human time, 30, 40 years, but in the time of the consumer's mind, 5 years. It will shock the system. When we have the F-150 from, Ford coming out that's fully electric that you could power your house on for 3 days from the battery system in it in a storm or an emergency, that's something the, NASCAR, Trump fan, off the grid prepper types are, quite frankly, huge fans of. And that happened almost in an instant as far as their experience. And I think that's how it can. Let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about sort of the way forward and how we transition that for people who are want to make those steps, right? So we'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT 820 AM. We'll be back right after this. Thanks, Johnny. There you go. So, yes, so
if
Brad,
only they could harness me.
If only, yeah. They might. You watch out. There's going to be some so horrible matrix of, like the Eve. Just this awful. I thought the tube goes down your throat. Not anymore. Not anymore.
It'd be like those suits in the Dune movie.
Yeah, it's like Butt Neo. Just what a horrible image I'm having in my head right now of him of Neo when he finally wakes up, just going, pulling this hose out of his backside. All to turn a human being into this. All right, so I'm going to turn you into a methane factory, which would be, by the way, a lot more efficient. There's no reason why they wouldn't do exactly that. I love how all the little tubes pop out of his chest as if that's efficient at all. Yeah. So, when we come back, Ty, let's talk about like kind of your kind of experience. I'm curious about your experience starting something like this in the ice skate uphill that is, like our current energy situation even a few years ago. Because how long have you guys officially been a business?
We launched this business 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, and in what was it like a year? Well, we'll talk about this on the air, but I'm curious about like the lead up to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So give me a second. Chicago, where are we? Do we have Chicago? Do we?
Yeah. Back in 20.
Okay, there you go. Okay, thanks. I'm telling you, there's a big fear in the if we get off gasoline, what are we going to do? Everybody's going to have to get on a bike in the morning to pedal their television to watch the morning news with the tube hooked up to their backside so they can pump methane into their vehicle.
This is Damian Perdue.
3 miles to work.
At 6 p.m. You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more.
Hal.
Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
Very macho. The whole thing's very macho. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're live streaming at infotainmentwars.com and, of course, at fwank.com, FWANQ.com. And with us is Ty from My Hero Power, myheropower.com. Check it out in the break. Because as much as I would like to pimp the service, which I genuinely believe in, I am curious that in the, like I said, this ties in for me to 9/11 because of our obvious involvement in decades and decades of dealing with oil producers, largely in the Middle East, and the horridness of our relationship with OPEC. Even the hostage crisis that ultimately ended the Carter administration and shepherded in the Reagan administration. First of all, what was the sort of, for lack of a better, for a better Ben Franklin analogy, what was the lightning bolt that made you decide to create a business like this to help people in this shift, or even that it was possible?
Yeah, I think, for us, we always wanted to make it easier for people to contribute to renewable energy. Right. So much of the talk around renewable energy or this transition to a green economy is the sacrifices that people have to make. And that's not true. I mean, that messaging is coming from conservatives. It's coming from the fossil fuel company. This whole idea of cutting your carbon footprint, your personal carbon footprint, the things that you have to sacrifice to do that. None of that's true. And what we wanted to do is just make it easy. Your life doesn't have to change, right, for you to support renewable energy, but for you to also support politicians that are going out and promoting more renewable energy, making it possible for us to power our lives on renewable energy, just like we power our lives right now with fossil fuels. The alternatives exist. We actually have the technology today with 2021 technology to totally decarbonize the electricity grid in less than 15 years. And that's with the solar panels, the wind turbines, and the battery technology that we have today. Imagine how much all of that technology is going to continue to improve as it has for the last couple of decades. So the transition the only reason why we're not doing it is for political reason. It has nothing to do with technology, and it really has nothing to do with sacrifice. We've got to talk about the benefits. And that's really why we started Hero Power. Right.
Well, and I would say, again, when people say the reasoning is political, I don't like to shift the blame off of us. Politicians ultimately chase the dominant thought form, and if the dominant thought form is run by industry because there is no corresponding argument to that dominant thought form, i.e. coal and gas for a very long time, then there is no alternative for that politician to even pitch to the American people as it might be tough for a while, but we really need to do this. That was a conversation that Jimmy Carter was having, putting solar panels on the White House and limiting, finally passing the rules on limiting lead exposure in fuel. And then pushing there was a shift in, I think, environmental groups towards a more local, all politics being local, if we're going to make that argument, that if you understanding the damage of pollution, like you said, we send 100,000 kids to the hospital every year with pollution related illnesses, respiratory illnesses and skin problems and all kinds of other stuff. 100,000. And I've often said, when you're arguing with the right wing, especially who are, against any kind of environmental cause, you can argue that point with them. I don't need you to understand climate change. I don't need you to grasp it. But you can understand toxic water, toxic air. And the people that you were talking about, especially the impoverished people of like places like West Virginia that are around these coal places, I would even argue that downstream, and I've talked about this being from Kentucky myself and growing up and going to like scout jamborees with kids from Eastern Kentucky who were living in Appalachia and were downstream, didn't even benefit from the coal jobs, were miles and miles and miles away from these places and were drinking toxic water from these places. And you know, their relatives had birth defects for decades because of this. That argument, in a caring sense with these folks and going, we're talking about not polluting water. We're talking about not polluting the air because of, you know, the children, the unborn. If you want to talk about the damage done to the unborn from environmental toxins that simply are not there if we shift to renewables. And then the geopolitical ties that we have to maintain just to guarantee that oil prices, you know, like even Biden had to, you know, talk to the to OPEC about you know, increasing supply. That's not oil we even use anymore. That's so that the prices in Europe don't go up, so that our oil companies don't chase that higher price, sell to Europe, and the price in the United States goes up, affecting the economy. We are still making political decisions about the health of our economy based on oil we don't even use. And that, I think, is where I think we can start pushing the conversation as well. So I know you're not necessarily going to want to do it on you know, on today in particular, but I'm going to. MyHeroPower.com. Please go check it out if you're in an area. And what it, you know, you'll see what it does. Now, here's the thing. In talking on your climate podcast, if people are interested in keeping up with this, what was, before we get to the bottom of the hour, what was sort of the biggest shock or eye-opening factor experience you had in doing the podcast? Because obviously you wouldn't do it if you weren't already engaged in the conversation. But there has to have been a oh my gosh moment at some point in doing the show over the last, you know, however long you've been, you know, the last year especially.
130 some episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, talking to experts all around the world, we learn something every single week. I will tell you this though, and it is, you know, relevant to the conversation that you're having today. The 1970s were the critical decade for setting the American pathway, the energy pathway. I actually spoke with the historian Jay Hakes on the podcast about his book Energy Crises. And what most people remember about the gas crisis of the 70s is just these long lines at the pump. But what most people don't realize is that the decisions that were made in response to this oil crisis by Nixon, Ford, and Carter, they locked us in to this fossil fuel dependence for, you know, the next 50 years. And of course, you know, Reagan came in and only made everything worse. But understanding our response to a tragedy, right, to a crisis, and figuring out the long-term repercussions of that, of all those decisions that were made in the 70s. I mean, really, you know, as you look at other crises that America has faced over the decades and seeing how we've responded, most of the time not well. And it just helps you understand, again, where we are today, why we are in the place we are today. And you just hope that we and our leaders can learn from those mistakes and start responding better.
Yeah, I will, in my own way, push back on that a little bit, because I would like to remind everybody in our own personal growth arc and in the growth arc of any nation on earth or all the other nations on earth, there is a level of assumed both interest and awareness and ability, a responsibility that we think, we look back on generations past, they had a responsibility to fix this before it became a crisis without the ability to actually respond. That the technology we are dealing with today, again, is a force accelerator. from AI and computers and the ability to kind of design a car and put it out without ever having to do it. Like new cars from Tesla, for example, they pass the crash test that they do before they are ever fabricated because of technology. They can make an electric car and present it to DOT, to the Department of Transportation, and then run the test and know it will pass. Something that cars way back when they didn't, when that wasn't even a remote possibility. When I had a 512K Mac, and that was amazing, right? When there were no hard drives in your computer, you had disks, and that was that. We now have no excuse. We now have responsibility because we have the ability to respond. We have alternatives. We have an awareness of the damage like no other generation ever on Earth. We are the generation that people can look back in the future and go and say they could have and should have done something in a drastic way. I don't blame my grandparents or my parents' generation because, quite frankly, the intermix of social and domestic dynamics mixed with foreign, economics and the fact that we didn't even have enough gas stations to get a car from A to B a long time ago, and we had range anxiety about that. They gave us every horror movie in the 50s. We're at the end of the hour, but I want to remind everybody to go to myheropower.com. Check it out, and if it's a possibility in your area, especially in the Chicagoland area, to start using renewables before the system around you has changed. Be a part of that. You can put your money where your mouth is. You can put your money where your belief system is. And it's not going to be a tooth pull. And then knowing you're doing that, then even stepping further into it. Maybe that's the first step, and then you put solar panels on your house as well. Perhaps if you're out in the far reaches of Illinois, you can start looking into geothermal as a possibility and those kind of things. Getting your system where you don't ever have to be a part of that energy grid except to maybe share what you're making with everyone else. It's a great possibility. And thanks so much, Ty, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll be back right after this. I totally rode into the break, but that's what we got to do. It's the House Park Radio Program, Mega Worldwide. Thanks so much, Ty. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice having you again,
really
Ty.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
yes.
and we'll have you on it again, and we'll talk about it a little. We can. I feel I don't have any reservations about pimping the company, even if you guys didn't support the station. Honest to God, I'm dead serious. I mean, I have no reservations whatsoever about making sure people know about the company. I was like, it's a win-win on so many fronts that I have no reservations about it. Like I said, if you guys weren't, if you didn't help CPT and weren't a supporter, I would still have you on. And I appreciate what you do. And thanks so much. And I think, like I said, there's not only is it okay to tie it in a circumstance like this, on 9/11, but a perfect time to remind everybody about this. So thanks a lot, man. I'm going to let you go. And before we get into the commercials and all that kind of stuff. Thanks, man.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, Al.
Yeah. Be well. Bye. Thanks. Cool.
I heard what you did there. Tie it in. Woo.
I will punch you in the...
You wish. I mean, I wish.
Aw. Thank you, Can't Stop Lying. He's just put the links in for everybody for the Climate Pod, for their theclimatepod.com, which is their podcast, and then of course My Hero Power, which is their thing. And I think, quite frankly, we should get you signed up on it, Johnny, and see how it works out. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Because it's the closest thing to switching to solar immediately. I wish we had it here. I swear to God, I've been talking about, every time they come on the air, usually I bring up they need to be set up in Las Vegas and in Tucson and in Arizona, any place with sunlight, too much sunlight. We have about the molten salt solar thing here in Vegas?
No.
Okay. if you, well, I'll bring it up at the top of the hour because I want to talk about that a little bit. But
Okay.
I will. I'll see if I can find a picture of it. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. This thing is crazy looking. I love what it looks like. Let's see if I can, yeah, give me 1 second. I'm going to switch back to here so I don't accidentally, show everybody your email. I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to take this thing and see. No, I can't put it there. I can take this guy and put it over here. And then I will take that guy and then I'll put it in the chat room, I think. There you go. And then send it. So that, I just sent you a picture. And I'll, there you go. And we're back.
Oh, it's wild.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So, I'll bring this back.
It looks a little bit like
the Eye of
like
Sauron.
an arena.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of. It also looks like the Good Witch of the West. Glinda's version of the Eye of Sauron. For those in the chat room, this is what I'm showing him. This is a picture of the molten salt solar installation outside of Las Vegas. There's 3 of those things now. There was one, and I remember when they were building it. I used to drive, back and forth, from Vegas to LA because, of Johnny's echoing now. That's so weird. It does that sometimes.
Check 1 2.
No, it's not you. I'll tell you exactly what it is. And I can fix it weirdly.
Tell me.
Click this off and then click it back on. And guys, let me know if the echo went away. Say hi, Johnny.
Hi. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Say Fred.
I know what it is. Hold on. Let's try this real quick. Because we jump back to this thing. Hold on. Here. There we go. Now it should be better. There you go.
1 2.
There you go.
2.
Got it. And it's fixed. It takes a moment for it. Thank you. There's most of the new nuclear reactors that are going online in the Netherlands, for example, are molten salt reactors. Instead of heating it with sunlight, they heat it with nuclear power.
Oh wow!
You're listening to the House
because it acts like a big battery.
Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at housesparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Bus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back. I'm really glad that the timing worked out that we got to talk to Ty on today. Because like I said, what it means to me to never forget 9/11 is to never forget what got us there. And I'm really against, you gotta have to know this from an ethical and moral standpoint. I am against casting aspersions on previous generations for not knowing what we know now. It is arrogant and silly and takes a lot of the responsibility off of us. I was showing Johnny Million something during the break, and then I showing the chat room that outside of Las Vegas.
So if you're listening on the radio, sorry.
You can look it up. Look up molten salt and Vegas, and believe me, a fancy restaurant in one of the casinos will not come up. Although you could absolutely, if there were, that sounds like a Vegas restaurant. Have you guys been to Molten Salt yet? Oh my God, it's amazing. I mean, they coat everything in salt, and you'll die of a heart attack the second you lick anything. But yeah, it's fabulous, fabulous. The ice cream, try it. The molten salt stores the heat from all these solar panels, these mirrors, really, that are reflecting the sun directly at this point. And then it stays hot all night long and creates steam. And a lot of our cities run on steam engines, kids. It's kind of amazing. We're yet to move into the Nikola Tesla world where we're getting direct energy from a lot of what we're doing. A lot of what we run on because of our roots in in the fossil fuel industry are, like a train engine. We're just shoveling coal in there to make the steam, puff through, and the pressure turns something, and off we go. Or minor explosions, as it would be in a car's engine. In this case, there was one of those solar reactors in the desert outside of Las Vegas, and you would drive past it and blind yourself because it was a novelty, and you're like, wow, what is that thing? And it is as bright as the sun. Do not look at it. Look at pictures, but when you drive through, unless you have, the glasses that...
I bet Trump could look at it.
Totally, yes. I was about to say, yes. Anybody but Trump. Trump can stare directly into it, apparently. And what's weird is he can stare at the sun for a very long time, and it never affects his brain.
Free healthcare for illegal. Look, to me, Corona means Italy. You're a mister.
So luckily, he's one of the superhumans who
He seems fine.
He seems fine after that. But there was one of those. Now there's 3 of them, and they're all on the east side of the road of the 215 driving south to Los Angeles or north to Vegas. I guarantee in the next 10 years, there's going to be 3 to 5 more of them, and they'll be on either side. So there will be, and then someone will sue, probably me, for degenerative eye disorder from all the, because I drive back and forth from Vegas to Los Angeles so often that I look out my window and I'm like, I'm blind. I'm blind for a while. I'm blind. But that is going to increase more and more. Did you just send me a picture, or that just went through? It just went boop boop on your little screen. It was good.
I don't know why. But I had it for a while.
But again, this is a technology that is increasingly coming online. That will work well in all desert communities as a power source. Is not reliant on how efficient solar power is. Mirrors are mirrors are mirrors are mirrors. And at some point, those mirrors can also be solar panels that you allow some of the UV to pass through and some of it to be reflected back. The direct light spectrum stuff, the heat of it gets reflected back. The absorbed energy can be used for power on a bunch of fronts. Those things get hot on their own just from the sunlight. That you can also drift off. There are 3 sources of energy from every single one of these technologies. Now, this technology is relatively new. The second one's better. The third one's even better than that. By the time they get to get these really solid, they'll eventually have a little guard around the outside of it where the visible light doesn't come out, but it's continuing to bounce through so that when you're driving, you won't be staring into 5 suns when you're driving through the desert. This is technology that in theory has been around since ever, but the ability to do it or do it efficiently or capture it is new and improving all the time. And we have not only a moral duty, I believe, to focus on this, we also, just on not damaging the environment, but also because the geopolitical pushback that we get because we've been in bed with oil companies that are in bed with the worst people in the world, and oftentimes are worse than them. I am always reminded, remember when the BP spill happened in the Gulf? And the head of BP comes out and he says, I just want my life to go back to normal. Remember that?
The poor guy.
Remember that? He was like, and people are like, how?
Very sad that he had to talk to people about it.
Yeah. Well, you know why? There was a reason why he felt that way. Besides, he was a disgusting human being. There's a reason why he felt entitled to not be bothered to even talk about this. Because Exxon had been dumping that amount of oil into the Congo every year for decades. So what's the big deal? The Gulf is enormous. There are underground volcanoes. Why are you bothering me? While underground volcanoes, we have to deal with as a natural part of it. We don't need to add. Life has enough problems without you adding stuff on top of it, is the reason, dum-dum. And this particular, this particular, his reaction was based on the idea that he knew guys in his job all over the world that pollute this much. They just do it closer to poor people. People with no recourse. The mistake BP made was polluting waters near people who would get angry and had the means and wherewithal to do something about it. A functioning government that could push back on it. An electorate and a citizenry that wasn't having it anymore. And could do something about it rather than just, deal with death squads. That's why he had to deal with it. That's why he was having to go in front of, give statements where the head of Exxon or the Tillersons of the world were not. They never had to do that stuff because they all did it in places where, does anybody really care? Right? And even in the areas, and on top of it, and this relates again to the sort of, to our sort of theme about environmental 9/11 remembrance, that even in the areas where they were dealing with pouring toxins in, the people that were running the area, that were allowing the corruption in the Niger Delta and other places, or in the Middle East and in Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that where oil was coming from, the leadership was so equally violently corrupt that even the American populace, the world populace, not just us, because we're not solely we consume a lot of the world's oil, but not nearly as much, the whole Europe doesn't even bother to spend. Yes, they do. And yes, they did. They just didn't tell the truth about it for a long time. And Russia was even worse about it, just choking cities, disgusting air pollution. Still to this day, it's always a problem. Even in those moments, in dealing with those, we as a society were like, well, we may be polluting those areas, but those folks are violent monsters who enslave their own people and blah, blah, blah. Like you could look down at the populace because of what their government was like. And they did the same with us. Our government was, or our corporations were these big violent things. So if we blew up some citizens, what's the difference? This is a human reaction to these things, one that we have to take responsibility for in ourselves when we see ourselves doing it. We got to take a break. When we come back, calls 773-763-9278. I think, maybe this diverges from how other people remember 9/11. And maybe that's the gift I feel like I can give in this, in this holiday, this holy day that we reference, the passing of these people. How we can best remember those people is to never get involved in a geopolitical resource war again, ever. And to learn from the ones and heal from the ones that we've been in, so that the trade that happens between countries is in businesses that are not crucial and binding and cause us to morally look the other way. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Mm-hmm.
We have a couple calls, by the way.
Oh, great. Excellent. My Katie in the chat says, my husband worked on the first solar tower out in Nevada. That's awesome. And tell him I'm blind. I blame him. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody. I need a therapist. All this stuff is driving me, life stuff is driving me insane. Well, get a grip. Understand people have had it worse. Find some strength in yourself and make it your duty to respond powerfully to things in your life instead of responding negatively or fearfully, because you absolutely can. That's all I can do. I can't be a shrink, but I can tell you the truth. That every insurmountable challenge I've ever experienced in my life has, I've either found some way to get through it or deal with the aftermath, because that's life, or find a way to grow from it.
20.
Thank you. Or beat it. you know? Well, yeah, we'll be back right after this. And we're going to take calls again, like I said, 773-763-9278, chat.
Attention. Stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So I have committed to my next car being fully electric and to not getting a new car until then. So that you know, my car's long in the tooth. I've got 130,000 miles on my vehicle, and you know, and I keep it in, you know, decent shape. It's a little dirtier than I'd like it. I'm a busy guy that does a lot of road trips. And I've had hybrids in the past.
I'm not going to touch your dirty car.
Thanks. I've had hybrids in the past, but I've never had a fully electric car. So, and I am on the list for the Cybertruck because I think first of all, it's way cheaper than I think it should be. And
is it like a Transformer?
No, it isn't. But it looks a lot like something from a 8-bit video game in the 80s. It has a very I love the 80s
Cybertruck.
I feel like I could jump out of it dressed, you know, cosplaying Chuck Norris in Delta Force, and it would work.
Ooh, you totally could. You do not need many pixels for this thing.
No, you do not. And I have friends who have Teslas and the like, and I carry a lot of gear, so having that, you know, ability, you know, being able to put an amp in the back of it is kind of crucial. So, and with the solar panels on top of it, so it charges while it sits, would be great. So that's my now there's a lot of options out there. By the time, you know, I get around to doing it, I very well may, you know, there may be something better that's an option. But right now that's the front runner. And you're too tall for my screen, Johnny. I'm like
sorry. I was adjusting my butt.
That happens. But you know, I don't know when the methane powered cars come, but we hope soon. Johnny Million. Here we go. So let's take some calls, though. 773-763-9278. Somebody in the chat said, of course, Hal Sparks would want a Cybertruck. Who do we have on the line, Chicago?
First up is Steve from the Gold Coast.
Excellent.
There you go.
Hey, Steve. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Yes, I want to make a couple of points. One, I think you're dead on with regard to linking these things to American foreign policy, energy, how we move forward. And make no mistake, we can become energy independent and we can move to renewable fuels, but you know we're still going to have a great deal of debt to pay in terms of the situation that we helped to create in the Gulf and so forth. Because if you think that Saudi Arabia is a problem now, wait until, you know, the only viable resource that they have, you know, the thing that creates wealth and allows people to drive around in Ferraris and McLarens disappears or is worthless. What happens then to that society? You know, how many more radicals are you going to create? It's very difficult to get somebody to strap on a suicide vest when they're driving a Bugatti. Are you out of your mind? I've got a Bugatti. I'm not about to blow myself up. You know, I'm reminded of that scene in Syriana where Matt Damon's talking to a progressive prince and basically giving him an honest view of what the world considers to be that part of the globe. And, you know, you guys were living in the desert 100 years ago, chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly where you're going to be 100 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of brutal, but in many ways, you know, it's reflective of what many people think. That, you know, that.
Well, I mean, even Russia's a good example of that as well, because Russia's, you know, entire economy, its kleptocracy is a petrochemical kleptocracy. It's what it's run on. And once we shun that forever, once we're no longer a part of that, the geopolitical blowback will be increasingly seen, and this is part of the shift that you're seeing in the Republicans holding their nose and letting stuff get through, and Democrats fighting actively for it, of getting us on renewables, getting us to electric cars and the like as fast as possible. because the geopolitical upheavals that are going to come from climate change, that are inevitable at this point because we have made so much damage, and it's even when we fix stuff or better it, it's going to take a long time to reset it. And much like you're talking about the geopolitical blowback and, from, wars for oil in the past, a lot of that's going to be felt in Europe and in Russia. Will be the fights between China and Russia and Afghanistan and the territories in that area fighting over a limited resource that fewer and fewer people use. And if we in the United States have all but weaned off we have weaned off foreign sources, but we are no longer playing in the sandbox of the geopolitical worth of oil, which is within the next 10 years, by the way. Just count on it. And you know that I know where you're getting to some degree with this too, is that the Saudis hit peak oil a long time ago. There's an argument that they have none left, that they are a monetary monstrosity, not a petrochemical monstrosity the way they were, that they've gotten through all the oil they have control of. And now they're trying to, through terrorism and other stuff, get control of more resources because
that's the conundrum.
Yes.
That's the conundrum of the oil-producing world, is that, okay, so overproduce, drive down price, okay, that's a bad thing for us. Don't let it sit in the ground as alternative renewable fuels are created. We could be left with the largest pit of worthless junk in the world, because that's what oil will be down the road. So,
imagine the Saudis trying to maintain their level of wealth and out of plastics. Out of the, imagine Middle East, Dubai, all that place run completely on plastics factories. By the way, as we also in the West start moving away from plastics, and we try to do reclaimable plastics and the like, we're going to move away from that stuff as well. This will be a bump in human history, right?
And I will say that, to be fair, and I get into debates with some of my more radical environmentalist friends on this, absolutely I concede that we need to be moving in that direction. Now, at the same time, they will give you this argument, we have done this to our planet. Yes, we have. But as you pointed out, what was the alternative a century ago? Were you going to tell, America, Europe, so many other places, oh, by the way, that standard of living that we've seen improving, extending life, lowering hunger and starvation, this sort of thing. Oh, we're just going to stop it because, we're having this adverse effect on the planet. Nobody was going to go for that. But instead, there's a trade-off, and now we can do something about it. But
right.
The idea that had we known 2 centuries ago, would we have done anything different? I would argue largely no.
No.
Even today, we plug in your electric car. Guess what? It doesn't come from the electric ferry. A lot of it is still generated by coal and oil and fossil fuels. So, we're not there yet. I think we can get there, though.
Yeah, we transition through history, and we can't pretend. I've always said, and I can't say how I say it on the radio the way I normally say it, but if we weren't a-holes yesterday, we wouldn't need tomorrow. And people, societies, technologies, evolve just like people do, just like animals do. There's a change over time, hopefully for the better. You have to manage that change. But this idea that we can somehow look back at the past like they should have known is an absurdity. And understand that somebody in the future's kid is going to look back at us and go, wait, they made batteries out of lithium? What was that? But it was the best possibility, and it transitioned us out of a more toxic way.
Almost 8 billion people in the world. Okay, how many of those would you have been willing to sacrifice because they never would have been alive?
Yes.
And that home that you grew up in, were you willing to grow up in one half the size and no access to education?
I would even go so far as to say when oil collapses, when it is no longer a viable monetary source that, as far as the return on investment, the ROI, once that turns on its head and it's not worth it to get out of the ground, but there are still massive amounts of vehicles all over the world that only run on it, right? When the rest of the world has moved on from that technology, we're going to lose 1 billion humans on this planet. There are 1 billion human beings, largely in Africa, India, and China, but South America as well, areas where cars in those areas, vehicles that used to bring food aid and the like, no longer exist, and massive amounts of starvation will happen because those transportation methodologies will vanish in a matter of years. It will sneak up on us, and there will be we will be flying as much food aid as we can into certain areas, but it will be overwhelmed. And that trade-off that came with was that those billion lives. And you have to go, well, to save the environment, do we lose $1 billion to save $3 billion over time? Those kind of decisions. It's the shoot the hostage argument over time on a massive scale. So we need to be more forgiving about the people behind us making that time,
Right, and unfortunately, you're going to have a hard time saying this to people who refuse to acknowledge that we are part of the people who created this crisis. It's not somebody who was, building a campfire somewhere in Central Asia. It was the industrialized West, because this is a cumulative effect CO2 and other greenhouse gases have in terms of the atmosphere. So, what your grandparents did when they were working in that coal mine or in that steel plant in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Chicago, that's what's creating global warming that's affecting the people who are the poorest in the world. We, who are the wealthiest countries, created this issue, not the poor people.
Right.
So when something happens to them, we're going to have to assume some of that responsibility. But it's hard to make that argument. The Republicans are going to stand up and say, well, why should Americans be paying for this? Because the science says that we are the ones who created it.
Right, but they'll also push back that there are only that many people alive because this technology existed, and that their adaptation of it on a looser scale that's more polluting than what we ended up coming to terms of, because we had bigger cities, more people close together, and we looked up at the sky and it was turning brown, and we're like, wow, this is going to wipe us out, so we better start working on it. And the trickle of that technology moving across the earth is very slow, especially where it's been stiff-armed by the petroleum companies over the years. That's where I think a lot of that goes. The people who were aware and did nothing, or kept it from the public, or made sure that certain technologies didn't, the perfect spark plug, that old argument.
Right, and that's an excellent point, and that's a great point, because a century ago, it simply wasn't there, the technology. But could we be 20, 30 years ahead of where we are now?
Yes.
Were it not for the role of public policy by the fossil fuel industry, retarding the development of electric cars, of other technologies. I mean,
no question.
For those not old enough to remember, I mean, watch what killed the electric car.
Exactly.
Decades ago.
Yes,
we were on the verge of doing something important.
That's right. We went over into the break. I appreciate it, Steve. I wanted to let you finish that thought. So thanks for calling in, brother. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Yeah.
See from the Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Rolling through. Trump's only income is from MAGA marks. Yes. Thanks. I'm glad you like my hair pulled back. I didn't have really a choice, because it was a lot of traveling and odd sleeping hours over the last. I didn't have a chance to get up and do anything with it. It's just.
Just wash your hair. Can't do a thing with it.
Can't. No. It takes time. Sometimes it's magic. When you got a big do, sometimes you just undo the ponytail and it goes foof, and you're like, oh, okay, But other times you're like, oh, well, no, I can't. It's frizzy. Do I straighten it? What do I do? It's a lot. It's just a lot. So this is why the billionaire space race irritated me. What a waste of resources. It isn't, though, because it's different technology. You don't relate space technology and the search for stuff for space with either food or energy usage here. It's not relatable. It's like saying, why are you trying to solve tuberculosis when cancer is killing way more people? They're unrelated. They are wholly unrelated, right? And we don't just chase the biggest problem around because we'd never make advances. Your sphere of, especially when it comes to technology, the sphere of influence and learning is an ever-expanding circle when it comes to science, okay? It doesn't mean like, oh, we're just all space and we've got nothing in this area. It all lines up over time. It all expands the, like our ability to deal with, environmental issues, set up satellites, improve communications, all that kind of stuff is always expanded. The fact that billionaires feel safe enough to fly into space right now is an extraordinary leap forward because the Challenger happened in our lifetimes. Understand that. That was not a long time ago. In human history, certainly not. And the fact that a billionaire whose life is worth all this and blah, 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 and if they die, the stock price drops and their family goes, without that 9th yacht or something, is a massive impact. And the fact that these people are like, yeah, I could totally fly into space and come back. That's huge in human evolution. That's a huge step forward. And a lot of times your canary in the coal mine is, are people of means willing to do it? And a lot of technology is like, well, poor people and, tech people and whatever, like the idea like astronauts who are basically like soldiers, sending them into space because we got to figure it out. We got to beat the Russians. So let's take some test pilots and chuck them into space in a tin can as fast as possible and costing their lives. The only reason this is possible right now, Elon Musk. Thank you. Elon Musk's whole like SpaceX thing, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, the advances!" Like it's all based on the mathematics and the technology that NASA built for years. That cost lives and fortunes of the American taxpayer. So it's only possible.
This is Damian Perdue of Think Theory Radio, Saturdays at 6 p.m. You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
Welcome back to the show. I know we have other callers on this 9/11 Remembrance Day. And again, I have just, for my own moral and ethical reasonings, I do want to use today to remind everybody what got us into this problem, and that the best way to remember the deaths of the people who were killed on 9/11 is to never get bogged down in a forever war over resources like oil ever again, and to honor our scientific know-how that will take us out of this stuff and always seek the better in those circumstances. I don't want to hear any arguments about lesser of two evils. If you have a choice between the lesser of two evils, choose less evil. Just as a general rule. And maybe if every time we made the choice, even when we're presented with those of not being I'm not going to make a choice. This is just between the lesser of two evils. Then maybe you're why we didn't take those steps every time to get us closer to this point, because Steve, our last caller, was right. And again, like even that molten salt tower that we have here in Las Vegas, that technology existed in theory. We just never went through with it because of the expense and because of the worry and because oil was easier, all these other reasons. And transitioning to that might mean that some people go hungry right now, and we don't necessarily want to make that balance, because I don't want, a 1/16 of my constituents to die or not be born because I rolled the dice on a technology that even the scientists that are with me can't say will work. That's why those decisions were made. Yes, we made, monetary, geopolitical money ones or whatever. But if you make it this kind of like fantastical Rockefeller chomping a cigar decision, this idea that robber barons and capitalists, blah, blah, blah. If you make that fantasy and take the responsibility off the public and what we would want and what we could push for and what we bring the ingenuity around by studying these things, by becoming engineers, by, pushing for these technologies within the sphere of actual knowledge, not a pie in the sky. Somebody should come up with a way that we don't have to use oil anymore. If we're going to abdicate that responsibility and make this fantasy, fat guy chomping a cigar from the Warrant album cover as the bad guy in this circumstance without recognizing the trade-offs that were done to save lives and to balance the needs of the public against what was possible and where we're going to go, then we're never going to get through these giant changes, and we're always going to get into forever war kind of situations. We're not going to learn the lessons of yesterday. So this is the generation that has the responsibility. We've given the responsibility to past generations in theory, in sort of a retrospective look back. I find that unfair and unethical on our part. We have the ability to respond. I don't believe they actually had it. If they did, they would have. That's just it.
Pretty much.
Sorry. I know how people want to shake their fist at people who are already dead and think that is a way to pat themselves on the back. No. That's a way of passing the buck. Forget it. Every generation wants to seek the power, the change they want to see in the world. Well, we actually can do it. There was a lot of failed attempts. You talk about the 70s in power, that led to, OPEC and the difference between them, like hostage situations and yada, yada. There were people constantly trying. My father built 2 of the first solar homes in the country in Kentucky, full solar houses in the 70s as an architect. He was the designer. One of them's built into a hillside. And it's kept cool by the earth and then heated in the winter by the insulation provided by the earth and by the solar panels on the outside. In 1976, and they tried and it failed because the solar panels at the time, the technology wasn't quite there yet. They made every attempt. There were valiant people fighting. As much as people make fun of the old Indian crying by the side of the road ad that everybody's like he was actually an Italian actor and blah, blah, blah. As much as that's kind of a joke now, that made a difference in people littering and polluting streams in the 70s. That shifted things.
It was the Wild West in the 70s. And people didn't give an F.
They didn't give a crap. I mean, Steve Martin had a joke about it. Always take a trash bag in your car, and if it ever gets full, you can just chuck it out the window. That was on Let's Get Small, I think. Right? And the minute, by the way, I guarantee you could track some level of like people littering again and going back to not giving a crap when people called out that old ad as embarrassing instead of recognizing the value it had and the impact it had socially at the time. And the people at that time who were trying everything they could to stop people from littering and polluting streams and recognizing that because it wasn't just about litter. That was a recognition that we are entwined with our environment. That the message of that was beyond just don't throw your trash out the window. It was, give a hoot, don't pollute was one of the, that was during our childhood as well. Mm-hmm. That was reminding people, that was the seeds of the only reason the person listening to my voice right now, understand our environmental impact. And why, when you hear about climate change, you understand and can grasp the concept is because your parents or the generation before them watched ads on television that said, give a hoot, don't pollute, only you can prevent forest fires, and had a crying Indian getting upset when someone threw trash out their window. Because the purpose of those was not just to deal with the localized problem, but to make people recognize we are entwined with our environment, that we have an impact. You think we have an impact and you understand we have an impact because somebody before you started that conversation. You did not wake up a brilliant person who's aware of climate change because, you just always would have. Because in 1950, you wouldn't have given a crap. If you were born in 1935, you'd have had bigger problems. I'm sorry. I know you think you would have been a social justice warrior, that you would have absolutely been an environmental steward, that you would have, nonsense. Nonsense. So give those people some credit for trying really hard. As people tried to, quell the Industrial Revolution and deal with carbon in their localized environment. Those are the people who planted the seeds of the trees you sit under Okay? Now it's your turn to plant the seeds that people will sit under in the future. I know I got on a rant, but this drives me crazy because people use it as an excuse to expect that someone will come up with a solution, and that somehow people who are alive now are better just cuz. You're not. You're better because generations before you started to wake up to this issue and tried really hard to jumpstart this movement many, many times. And the same thing is true about gay rights and trans rights and all this stuff. You look back at people and you're like, these people were disgusting, whatever. Nonsense. If you'd have been alive then, you'd have thought the exact same thing. Sorry. You don't get to just because of when you were born magically wake up a better person. It's embarrassing. Stop saying that. Stop saying that if you were alive in the 1800s. It's like the Eddie Murphy bit about slavery in Delirious. If you haven't seen it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Have some humility in the face of this tide. And recognize, too, that you have currently an ability that they did not have. That's why you think it would be easy. Because you think you're a swipe right environmentalist now. You can hashtag your way into feeling like you're doing something. And by the way, you can. Because when you hashtag something, you let the general populace know that you're on the team for we can balance this. I'm on the side of renewables. Let's move towards this. I'm really willing to tighten my belt a little bit. So when you do that hashtag stuff, it does matter. It does help. It is valuable. But don't pretend that that's the heavy lifting of working on carbon caps in 1982, when everybody thought you were a lunatic, or Jimmy Carter putting solar panels on the White House and Ronald Reagan taking them off. By the way, Biden White House, please put them back on. My guess is they're going to do it probably for Earth Day. That would be my guess. I hope that was your chair squeaking, Johnny. This matters. I ran straight through that break. We'll take a couple of calls in our last little segment on our way back. So you're listening to the House Sparks radio program, Mega World Rant. I'll be back right after this.
Mega World Rant.
Yep. That's, Stratton, Reagan was awful. But Reagan was predictable in the same way that Trump was predictable. And Trump and Reagan were both a reaction to overreach by Republicans in terms of Nixon, resulting in people wanting someone a little more stable and normal in Carter, and him moving forward with environmental issues in a way that people weren't ready for yet. And then there was a backlash, because a backlash really is when a new idea trickles down to the general populace and it's not explained well. The early adopters of an idea are always on board right away. You get it because you give a shit. They don't. They don't know yet. And
My heart always skips a beat. I have no idea how you know when
I'm in break to swear. Right.
Yeah.
I always know I can swear in between, guitar riffs.
Back in 20.
Thank you.
Larga.
This matters. You know what I mean? You have to understand that if you overreach, if you try to convince the public of something they're not ready to grasp yet, then they're gonna
happy ending or no?
No, not today.
Right decision.
Nope. Thank you. Just regular breakback. Thank you for asking. That's much better. Much more subtle.
Stop what you're doing.
That's all I got.
Yeah, I understand.
Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
What? Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Wow. What?
Welcome back. Before I get on another rant, because I will, as everybody who watched through the break on infotainmentwars.com or on fwank.com knows, or on Twitter, I haven't forgotten you guys. I just don't know if you watch for a little bit and then jump over, or if you would please go over and subscribe at infotainmentwars.com. Just type it right in. I bought that URL years ago as a spoof of InfoWars, and I think it's quite cute. I gotta say, I think it works very well and fits our general oeuvre of work, as it were. So infotainmentwars.com, like and subscribe today if you could at the YouTube channel. Give us a lift up, because you have to understand, I got less than 25,000 subscribers on YouTube right now. And last year, this time, I had less than 5. So we're definitely growing. A 400% plus growth in the last year. That's pretty solid. Rudy Giuliani has 116,000 subscribers or something along those lines. And
Did you see the hot girls and boys video chat?
Quit. Don't call attention to the trolls and the people who are... No.
Don't pay attention. How can I not? I've got to go sign up. Hang on.
No, do not. I swear to God, young man. Now I got to...
I think it's legit.
Do you? Yeah, give me your credit card.
Do you?
They restart every time. So, let's get to a caller though, because we got about 10 minutes left in the show, and I want to get to them. So who do we have next, Chicago?
You got David from North Miami Beach.
Excellent. Hey, David, welcome.
Greetings, time changer. That's a movie joke.
Yes, understood.
Yes. Now that Sean Kaminsky is retired as the bionic brain of morning radio,
right, of Steph. Yeah.
Well, I guess
he's only temporarily retired. He's going to look after his mom, who has cancer. If people who don't know, Sean works on Steph's show. He's gone to take care of his mom, and he'll be back hopefully. And we wish her health and long life. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Amen, Yashikoa. Yes. Yeah,
Whoops. Lost
I guess a lot of us are frustrated at fighting the same crime families generation after generation. The Kochs, the Bushes, the Romneys, now the Trumps. But I called because a lot of this coverage, especially NBC, it feels like the SNL 90s sketch imagining Liza Minnelli having a talk show. And she's supposed to talk to Gillian Anderson about X-Files, but she keeps going on and on with Joel Grey about them doing Cabaret.
Right.
That their minds are stuck 20 years
right
in the past with no context.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a lot of people don't know the name Iron Eyes Cody, the actor mentioned. He made an appearance in the 80s sitcom Newhart. They don't understand, the context that there was at least an attempt to fight back the worst of big business.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they came back with a backlash. They enter President Reagan and his.
See, I would say there's a silver lining to what you're talking about, because I'm glad you brought up the line of names that you're talking about. And Romney's probably the closest to being like an old school robber baron, but he did not get elected, and he's been a senator, and his reach, while Bain Capital has done some damage in the AM radio world, hence the lack of Stephanie Miller in an LA station, for example. Ultimately, he has not had the same kind of control right, exactly. He has not had the same kind of control ultimately as the industrial robber barons of the early 20s or whatever. And if your idea, let's say you wanted corporate control of everything, and originally you started with a Rockefeller kind of idea, or any of the main robber barons, that controlled steel mills and newspapers, the Hearsts, whatnot. And you've wheedled all the way down to the Trumps, a family organization with no stockholders and no real holdings, who's massively in debt and failing miserably. He did one term, lost by the largest margin ever in a political race to an outsider, to a challenger. If that's the direction that corporate control, as far as these robber baron crowds are exerting, we're in a better place even now than I thought we were. As bad as he was and is a failure.
True. to get
luckily.
back to
But yeah.
or as he calls it, beautiful clean coal.
Yes.
I hope that the liberals and the libertarians can reach across and end these carbon subsidies that makes these businesses run, because otherwise, how much of their profit is based on polluting water, killing residents?
It's corporate welfare.
Subsidy.
It's
resource curse.
It's also corporate welfare because we pay to clean it up. Like I said, if gas costs what gas costs, we wouldn't use it. We subsidize it. The government subsidizes it through taxes. So you pay what you don't pay at the pump, you pay through your taxes. And the same thing is true of coal. You're like, oh, my energy costs are low. No, they're not. Right.
What Norman Goldman used to call the $1 million a year gas.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, say that again because you dropped out.
Norman Goldman used to talk about the $1 million a year soldier or contractor guarding the Caspian Sea pipeline near Afghanistan.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it was ever built is secondary, but that's a carbon subsidy. And that's not capitalism. Capitalism assumes we're all at the same board game and we all start with the same amount of cash, give or take. No, it's somebody's thumb on the scale. That's not capitalism. Tom Hartman doesn't like when I say that, but that's mercantilism. That's something else. So,
well, it's also, and again, there's a balance to be struck here in that we decided, again, not to put this off on anybody else and say that some sort of mad capitalist is in charge of this. We made that trade-off as a public because we recognize the quality of life and like as much as we talk about like food insecurity in the United States, we used to talk about starvation. That's a shift brought to us by our economy, by resources, by the availability of food, by trucking that brought food all over the globe, or especially in the from Canada to Mexico to the United States, back and forth. We played a part in this. We decided we would like, if somebody has 5 kids, we'd rather not the 5th kid starve to death. We don't want the entire Appalachian region, most of the South, good portions of like the industrial North. We had a runt death issue, like everybody had a litter of kittens, and the smallest one was just going to be sick. We had a Tiny Tim problem in the Industrial Revolution, pre-industrial revolution, where if you had a kid that wasn't going to make it, the family just kind of over time had to deal with, they weren't the one you were going to save. If you had resources, they were going to the kid who could keep the family alive, who could dig trenches, who could be a miner, that kind of stuff. We made that trade. We did, not some magical robber baron. And over time, they acted on that impulse and went, okay, they're willing to go this far. Are they willing to go this far? Are they willing to go this far? And we said yes. And that was the tug and play. Now we have an option we never had. And that's the part they're dealing with. That's the shift that's occurring on the earth right now. And we're in that shift. We really are.
All right. I just hope we could find a way. I mean, even if it means occasionally, propping up the next Solyndra, heaven forbid, if it actually performs a public good, fine. But if it means, reliving the movie The Informant, about how the big food companies are cornering the market and burning their own customers and salesmen. Let's try to avoid that.
Human nature is part of it, and there are going to be barnacles on every whale. You just have to recognize that and not get demoralized because that exists. That's going to happen. So you fix it and you get on with it. We cannot react towards emerging technologies that are going to save us from this the same way that the right wing reacts to Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security by going, there's so much fraud. There's fraud. There's this much fraud. There's the tip of your fingernail worth of fraud compared to the lives it saves. And so, you know what I mean? We can't go, of course there's fraud in Medicare and Medicaid. You deal with it. Right.
If we're saving lives, great. But if we're just, fattening Swiss bank accounts, then I'd have to scratch my head.
Well, and I also got
get it right.
I appreciate that. What I'm saying is that you're going to do both at the same time. That's sort of the price of doing business in life, because if you're talking about limited food and you go, how are we going to grow food? And then, if we've got droughts and all this other stuff, I'll tell you how you're going to do it. You're going to do it in reclaimed high rises in major cities with hydroponic lamps and infused soil. And you're going to have, a big tower in the middle of Chicago that used to be an office building that nobody goes to because they can work from home because of computers now, that's now got cornfields in it. And that's what's going to happen in Detroit. And it's going to happen in Los Angeles. And it's going to happen in all these, it's going to happen in the cities that have been broken by the industrial shifts. And it's going to be done by the cities that are advanced in their search for climate renewal. That's where it's going to happen. And that's how.
Remember
yes.
that when you're buying 666 Fifth Avenue.
I will. I absolutely think. Yes, the top 10 floors are farming. I completely agree. And legalize hemp everywhere. That's. I think we can all agree on that because that's where the future of plastics is going to come from. And you can grow. It grows everywhere. It's called weed for a reason, and you can't get rid of it. And it's resilient and will grow on a hillside with nearly no water. It's very tough. And you can make plastics and paper and all kinds of stuff. The Constitution of the United States, written on hemp paper, folks. I mean, that should teach us a little bit of a lesson. I think, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. We've only got a couple of seconds left. Yeah, absolutely. In the show. And I know the rest of your day is probably going to be seeing on the news replays of the towers being hit and remembrances and the like. And there's a value in watching those things. I don't envy you the sorrow that you will feel in watching those, but I do want you to feel a renewed sense of drive and optimism towards a more renewable future and an abundant future. We'll see you guys next time. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. We'll see you next Saturday.
Love ya.
Yep. True that. Thank you, Chicago.
Thank you. Great show. See you next week.
Absolutely. Cheers. And Johnny Million, I will let you go. I'm gonna do some some prep and some tweaking on my setup here. Over the next.
What are you doing?
Nothing. I just don't have to. I have to go to LA Tuesday. Drive back and forth. So I'm back and forth all the time. So I have to be at the house Tuesday, Wednesday of this coming week, and then come back to do the show. So. But compared to the last few weeks where I've had to go twice in, 2 weeks in a row, and then if you count Summer and I having her birthday out of town, I've been traveling a bunch. So I have 4 days this week where I'm definitely here where I can work on stuff, and 3 days before I have to go to, there where I can get in a groove. And, I'm always kind of trying to improve the stream, and a lot of it's been like patched together. I've got a duct taped ship in some ways right now that I know I can now take it up out of the water and do that. Yes, I am currently running for the mayor of LA. I filed my paperwork for my notice of intent. I am not raising money till January, just for the record. So know that. So I don't want it to infect my ability to do the show. I've got to, see what their response is.
I think that is going to be in concert with the announcement of OnlyFans.
Yes. Yeah. That's how I'm going to raise money for the.
That'll be a big fundraiser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically it'll be a campaign OnlyFans for mayor kind of thing. But yeah. So and I've got a lot of like prep. Video shooting to do and like ads and stuff. And yes, that's for real. Yes, for real. I'm really running. Your environmentalist interview was on the mark. Thank you so much, Hippie's back. Appreciate that. So anyways, I'll let you go, Johnny. Take care of yourself and big hug and love you. And I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.
Big hug. Love you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So hi, chat room. And I'm going to sign off now as well so that I can get to work on some of this other stuff. And I appreciate you guys being with me today for the radio show. I have to set up a thing so that I can tape the boxing match thing that Trump is doing or record it somehow so that I can joke on it. So that's going to be gross. But I'm sure it will be good for a laugh. So there you go. So, TLK Knitting. Hi. How are you? We're gonna. So I'll hop off right now. And let's see. Is this on here? Yeah. Hold on. Nope. It's still looped in there. Sometimes when I go to do my raids, I'll go, oh yay, they're on, and then they're not on because it's actually still on the page. I have to reload the page or the raid button on Twitch thinks whatever was on before is still on. It's a curious bug, Twitch. I'm just saying. It doesn't auto fix itself. The video's fine. I see the chat, all the other stuff. And thank you, by the way, Kale Link and Jezebel and the folks and the new follows. I appreciate that. Thank you, Aggie, for the super chat. Bless you. Hal Vickery, thank you so much. Iron Eyes Cody was Sicilian. Yeah, that's right. My wife was half Sicilian, so in honor of both of them. Oh, that's awesome, Hal Vickery. Diana Turner says, in the early 60s, my parents protested against an oil refinery to be erected in our hometown in New Jersey. Right. Those people were doing their best, Diana. I appreciate what your parents did. You know, and I don't like people talking shit about previous generations, not understanding that they were ice skating uphill a lot, you know, and they did not have the resources or the social media network or the you know, more than 3 channels to talk on. They certainly didn't have YouTube to make videos about the oil industry and what they were doing. So thanks for the new subscription on YouTube as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I have to remind everybody to do that, and I'm terrible at it. Thank you, Robert, by the way. I know Johnny saw that one, but he said, but hi to Johnny as well. I know he's peeking in at the tail end from Robert. One of the new things I want to add is the ability to pop stuff on the screen from the chat, and that's an extra layer of difficulty in the current setup I have without putting in some other craziness. So keep your fingers crossed. I'll make it work. And then getting my audio back up and running where I don't have to have overlaps and echoes, and also where I can use my voice box thing that I was using. It worked for a little while and then stopped working. Thank you, Popples80. So everybody check out myheropower.com if you're in that area. See if it works for you. Maybe it will. That's a cool thing. But if it doesn't, maybe there's something like it in your area that you could use. Or let me know if you're, you know, we'll do a show on who's solar and who wants to be and how can you and all that kind of stuff over the next couple weeks. We'll add that to our, whenever we're talking about climate change with the right wing. You know what I mean? That would be a really great addition, I think, to our conversation. Yeah? It would certainly be a morning show background. Yes, exactly. I am working on a setup just for the morning show that's different from this one, so people know what they're looking at when they watch later. So, yeah. Anyway, everybody have a good day as best you can, and a better weekend, and find that more live Snapchat filters. Exactly. Find that window of optimism in the future, because that is, please wear strong sunglasses as you travel to LA. Yes, absolutely. I'll probably have to wear a welding helmet at some point once they have 6 of these friggin' things. They should have built them on the other sides of the mountain, but hey, who am I to say? What a crazy, huh? I know, it's nutty. Anyways, Johnny Million plays an SG. I know he has one. Biden will be in Boise on Monday to visit the National Interagency Fire Center before heading to California. Yeah, because that's the midpoint where they have to, you know, when they run to the fires everywhere. Wear sunscreen. Use a background from Bionic Island. Right. I think I'd get in trouble. So I'll find something that doesn't make me look like a new version of, you know, like The View and those morning shows that look like they're on a space station, like they're all on Elysium. Mods webcam. Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you, Maria. And I thank you guys for being with me every Saturday as well. Those of you that join on the regular during the week and have been visiting during the morning shows. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm doing a morning stream just to kind of do a hangout and kind of deal with what's trending. You know, the wake and bake that a lot of people do about social media. Give it a little bit of perspective, have a little bit of fun, have a cup of coffee, and talk to people. And hopefully you can join me. If you can't, I'll see you in the regular afternoons, and have a great weekend. Take care. Okay, bye.